We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, as the others do.
So the old adage that we heard, if you ever watched the Battlestar Galactica series, the most recent one, towards the end, the Cylon, I think it was number 5, I can't remember, who played the lead Cylon, pretty much, as far as...
Yeah, she used to wear the red dress a lot.
Yeah, you know, here's this supposedly sexy guy.
Red dress.
Yeah, that's another story. But essentially at the end, the two of them are walking, the guy, Baltar, who was with her, the two of them are walking through a new projection of what was about to become Caprica. If you remember the series Caprica, that we would evolve into Caprica because the original written content of the first Cylon was created and then magnified by a form of artificial intelligence, and because it was an introduced technology from the Cylons from the future to basically make sure that humanity would go the way that they chose them to go, the way that they were engineered to go. And I'm here to say that we don't know how many societies have existed on this planet like ours that have gone from basically primitive state of living all the way up to our current technology, and that this has been repeated many times after our society is wiped, or what we like to say, harvested. And we are in not only the harvesting time, but the 26,000 year cycle where everything's supposed to shift now for good for a while, because Father created a marvelous universe where good and evil would balance each other based on a great timepiece that he created that counts and marks time, even though there are many beings that exist beyond time.
Yeah, and we were discussing, the reason why we were discussing this is because I put a picture up on the cutting room floor this morning, and we have spoken about the transliteration of text and how it has changed all the time, and that is done through historical records. So there's a picture up on the cutting room floor that you guys need to look at, and it shows a building of a photograph in the 1800s. Now I know it's the 1800s because the guys are wearing bowler hats in it, but if you look at the date of the building, and then you look at the date, they usually put the date of the building when it's completed, right?
Yeah, and this particular building was an older building.
Yeah.
So it was obviously built at least probably 400 or 500 years ago,
Yeah,
I would say, right?
I'm going to say this came about after the last mini harvest, which was the 15th century.
Right.
So I'm going to say that this building is pretty old.
Because that's when the Renaissance came, you see.
Yeah. Well, what we want to mention about all of that is that if you've ever listened to that interview, a conversation that Morpheus, that reptilian guy, had with me about these drawings that I found, the Book of Miracles,
Yeah.
the German paintings, what you're going to notice in that is the buildings are pretty much about on the same par as the same level as this building.
Yeah,
You're
because that was an epoch, an area of time that there was this sort of almost Romanesque way of building.
Yeah.
It was the imprint of that current society, and they were more Gothic, they were more primitive, and I'm here to say that that may have been an entire other time period where this was the end of that age.
Yeah.
And the beginning of our age.
And that's my point, is that
Which
around...
always comes with a Renaissance and a Dark Ages, by the way.
The last of the drawings that came from that book were around 1560. Okay,
Yeah.
They were about the last time that I saw those drawings. Now, if you coincide what the events that came to transpire in 1560, all the way from 1100 to 1560, so for 400 years... on and off, they were having recycles of our planet. They were resetting our planet because we got Black Plague and that killed off a massive amount of the population, and then they recycled. So we're looking at being in a loop like Groundhog's Day. That's pretty much, if you look at it from a simple ideology like that, they have the same playbook, so they use the same weapon tools, like hailstones the size of baseballs, hurricanes, water, tornadoes. All of those drawings in 1560 were projecting the same things.
And they view this as tools to shape the clay of humanity.
Yeah.
And, viruses, all these things. They're like, okay, we need to get the population down to this number. Everyone needs to be reset for the game again. Everyone's starting out in a primitive age. Oh, no, wait a minute. Let's take it up to about the 1800s. Let's give them steampunk era.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we'll start the game there in the steampunk era. Or they'll take us back to like the sands of Egypt and start all over again, and then they'll slowly introduce technology at certain times, and that technology will then speed the crop along to make it ready to become ripe and harvestable again.
But then they'll never let us get past that certain
right,
point.
There's a certain
in technology.
point. Exactly. Thank you for saying that, Aradil.
They will never let us advance past that certain point of technology. Now, if you look at some of the hieroglyphs on ancient Egyptian tombs, you will notice that there were nuclear warfare going on. They
had tanks, helicopters. I mean, you could see this stuff, people.
Okay, so
it's like, well, where did that come from? Well, it's because they use the same script. The same technology is allowed to us because they've already decided what technology we'll be able to have. So they keep reintroducing that technology, the diagrams, and then they make it like someone created it.
Yeah.
Like Leonardo da Vinci. He was so far ahead of his time, there's no question he knew about reptilians. A lot of his drawings and paintings, when you inverted them or you folded them, you would see the imagery of aliens and reptilians looking back at you. So what is going on here? These people were ahead of their time because they weren't people most of the time. They were also one of the darker beings that were there to bring this form of additional technology. And when new technology needed to be introduced, it would suddenly appear like some brilliant being showed up and thought it all up himself, okay? That's what they thought Leonardo da Vinci was. No, he was simply like Tesla, revealing the things that had been given to him or gifted to him, but in this instance, gifted to him by dark angels.
I tend to think he was a reptilian that was walking around in a human form.
Most likely. Most likely.
If you guys have ever inverted some of his paintings, and I think I've actually put one or two of them up
on the cutting room floor. Yeah, you always do that stuff.
I spent hours inverting some of his pictures. And I gotta tell you,
it's amazing what she saw. I was like, "What are you looking at?" I said, "What is that thing? It looks like a demon." She said, "Oh, that's this, the Mona Lisa."
The reptilian
and then you take it halfway and divide it and fold it. All of a sudden, you're looking at like some kind of alien or demonic face looking back at you. It's quite frightening. It really is, because he's saying that this is what you're really giving your energy to. And these were what? They were physical constructs
Yeah.
that were designed to carry and project energy to the hidden image that was actually within the painting, which was some kind of alien being or overlord at the time. That's why he was so popular. He was commissioned to build and create things that others knew were coming, and the other reptilians who would play those roles would then engage his services, and before you realize it, it was all through society. That's how, and that's the important reason why the Renaissance happened, which was to spread more technology.
And I want to mention something else about these paintings. These paintings have been the most popular. Who's been some of the most popular scientific experimentations of humans, so-called? Leonardo da Vinci. What? We honor him. We think he's an amazing guy. He brought all this stuff to us.
Just the diagrams of the human body.
He was a reptilian, people.
Yeah, he knew the human
And
body
he knew-
intimately.
And every time you look at one of his paintings and go, oh, wow, you are giving him energy. Were you aware of that? Paintings are constructs. This is why I create art all the time, because they're constructs. And I create beautiful constructs because that's the way our world is supposed to look.
And you as creator gods, when you look at those constructs, we don't know where our energy is going half the time. We're just admiring art, right? We were brought up to admire artwork because at that time there weren't TVs and televisions to
Right.
program your mind. So guess what they used? Hypnotic forms of artwork.
Yes.
And people would be like, wow, there's just something about the Mona Lisa. I
Yeah.
can't put my finger on it. And you look at that picture and you know in the back of your subconscious that that face looking at you is not entirely human. You know it. You know it like you know it. And the thing is, it was designed that way because right on the threshold of your subconscious is where that ability to reach and touch that creator God energy exists, because you're not supposed to be able to control it fully as a human, and you're not supposed to be able to control it fully as a soul because you're in a suppression zone,
Yeah.
right? But the suppression zone and the restrictions that have been placed upon this planet are being dissolved. Do you realize that there is an overlay that has existed all over this planet to not only be able for them to project reality or overlay reality of what the stars and everything else is supposed to look like, but also to keep us essentially in this prison.
Yeah.
You can't leave it. So that's why they have devoted so much time to literally blowing a hole in this thing, which they've done and has done and have done in the 40s and 50s. They had all those experiments going up where they're exploding hydrogen bombs and, really
Yeah.
high altitude.
Well, that was written on the Egyptian walls too.
Yeah.
The bombs. So, guys, we're living back in that right at the end there before they recycle us. But this time round, Father's like, I don't think so.
Because we're also at the 26,000 year mark.
Yeah. And he's like, I don't think so. Now, if you guys understood what we said about some people are not ready to go yet, and they're going to relive this third dimension, I put another video up this morning from the Blue Avians who are explaining pretty much the same thing as what we've been trying to tell you guys, is that not as many people as they think are going to be going to the fifth.
But yet, here's the other thing that you need to know about that. You can still be on your progression to the fifth dimension.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that the work you've done stops. It
No.
just means that you've achieved a milestone in the third dimension. You will probably end up back in the third dimension, but a better aspect of the third
That's
dimension.
what I'm saying, where you are at your understanding level. Now,
And you'll
some,
continue to be allowed to progress.
some people are at the beginning of the third dimension, like say in third world countries, like in Philippines or Indonesia.
Right,
They're
'cause
right at the beginning of that third
And
dimension.
you haven't earned the rank yet to be in a
Right.
higher being, so they put you in an area where you're probably going to experience poverty and other things first, because they want you at the lower dimensions to realize that your actions and the things you do matter, and it can affect your life, whether or not you'll live in poverty or whatever you're going to do. But those people tend to be more punished in the third dimension, so to speak.
They're the ones that have usually come from the top of the second dimension and are now working into the third.
Or have
they've
regressed.
suicided.
Yeah, thank you.
Or
You
if
need
they
to cover that.
did commit suicide,
Or-
they may go back right to the beginning of the third dimension again.
And you're missing an important point here. There's also those beings that are higher, darker dimensional beings that may have been demoted because now they've decided that they want to be a good being. So they usually lose some of their power, but yet they drop down to a lower dimension in order to pay back the karma that they owe to travel back up again to a higher dimension where they will be accepted as a good being.
That's true.
I wanted to add that. I'm sorry, I just didn't mean to interrupt your flow there, but that happens sometimes. I always have Stephen interrupt my flow. I just shut up.
So what we're saying is that some of you are on the higher third dimension. Okay, you're ready to evolve into the fifth because you've traveled through all of the spectrums of the third dimension,
right?
And you have gone from the lowest of the third right up to the point where the glass is pushed up against your face and you're ready to bust free. That's where some of us are in this third dimension. So Father's looking at those and saying, okay, this one needs to be pushed over to here. That one needs to go over there.
Right, it's a sifting.
It's a sifting. And so don't feel bad if you think that you are entitled to go to the fifth dimension, but it doesn't exactly work that way.
You're still getting there.
You're still getting there. Coming back to this world when it's been cleansed will be beautiful.
Everybody thinks that it's this process that happens instantaneously to the whole world. Now, the energetic pulse that triggers it to begin may take place like that, but we're here to say that everyone progresses at their own speed, and Father will organize you based on where you're at.
Yeah.
So if you're doing good and you're almost to the fifth, but you're not quite there, Father will put you in a really good third dimensional projection.
Yes.
Which you won't notice any difference, and neither will the other people that are there with you. But if you are taken away from this reality, you won't even know it. You'll just appear in another reality, and you will automatically have the knowledge of that reality and that life, and you'll think that you've lived that life for that whole time. So Father does shift souls around. If you pray hard enough, you may find yourself in a position where you think, wow, life is suddenly really good.
Yeah.
Well, that's because Father put you there.
He put you in a different dimensional way, and you're not aware of it. I mean, you could go to sleep one night and lay down with all of this crap going on in our world as it is. And then the next morning you wake up and you just feel really good. And the world is quieter.
And it's different.
And you don't understand what's happening. But that's because Father said, okay, this one here needs to go into this 3D reality. We need to push them into this dimensional aspect.
And whether or not Father will let you remember will determine on exactly why you're there in the first place.
Yeah.
Because it is an individualized prescription, the same way that a doctor may see you and decide you need certain prescriptive medications, which, by the way, are coming to an end with the med beds, but that's another story. But let's just say that Father is the one writing the script, and he says, okay, you need about 20% of a better family. You need 30% of a much more prosperous life. You need 25% of a really good relationship with somebody. And here's my prescription, and I give it to you. And you're still just plotting along in the third dimension.
Not aware.
All of a sudden, you meet this beautiful person who just falls in love with you, and life is suddenly better. Then all of a sudden you have money, and you don't know why. And this is you being promoted. Do you understand that you're actually
promoted on a level that you can understand?
Yes.
So here's the thing, guys. I've gotten some emails saying, well, how come I don't get to talk to Father? I'm trying, and nothing's happening. Maybe it's because in this 3D dimensional aspect and the different dimensions inside your 3D world, maybe you're not at that level yet. Did you guys consider that?
And that the other problem that people have with this whole religious thing is excessive ego and excessive false belief that just radiating good energy is the only thing you need. These are two important factors that you will need to learn in your spiritual growth, that simply radiating good energy does not necessarily fix the karmic events of your life, although it will begin to change it. And over time, being excessively positive and energetic will attract that kind of energy into your life and or you to another dimension that you will change automatically but not be aware of it and still retain what you perceive to be your understanding of reality as it's happening right now. So it can be a bit confusing to people. They're like, wait a minute. It's like trying to find a radio station that you want to listen to. Sometimes you got to tune in and tune out other radio stations. Well, Father may actually try you in different dimensions.
Yeah, and see what you do with it. Because that's Father. He's very curious about the soul and what it's capable of doing. And he will give, sometimes he'll give you an assignment and see what you will do with it. And you may not even be conscious that this is what Father's doing, and he's taking a look at you and go, well, now let's just see what he or she can do. And he'll leave you alone for a while to grow in that thought pattern. But you see, you may not be aware of that, and I've had people say to me, well, I'm not changing, my DNA doesn't seem to be changing. Maybe because you're not at that point, as we were explaining, in that dimensional aspect that you're ready to evolve to another dimension, a higher dimension. Maybe you're at, say, halfway, midway in the third dimension, and you're still got a few more
little issues.
lives
You
to
got
live.
some. You've got a few things, a few loose screws rattling around.
Because a lot of what Mike and I say may not make sense to you, and you're like, what?
But it will make sense to you if you understand what we're talking
Yes.
about. And that's why we say that some of this is what we like to call spirit speak. That we're speaking to the spirits that need this knowledge and nourishment and that now are beginning to realize these things. And as your awareness increases, so can your spiritual prowess.
Yes.
So that's why it's interesting that for you to want to listen to us, because as we tell you these things, you become more educated, and all of a sudden when you know certain spiritual truths, all of a sudden things change around you. Like, you can't be fooled as much. It's harder for people to lie to you. All of a sudden you just know what is right and what you need to do. And things will change in time as you open up to Father. And it's a vast, wondrous universe that Father has laid before us. And you can live it in almost any way you want to, but you have to follow Father.
And you can look at certain aspects of the lessons that you're starting to learn. And you can say, okay, well, I don't understand this yet. Maybe I'm not ready. But don't look at it in a frightening way. And that's another thing that people are just getting so angst about, is that they're frightened that this is going to happen to them, and they're frightened that that's going to happen to them. And what that actually does is push you back. So when they say no fear, what they're saying is no fear, because you're either going to stay in your spiel of knowledge in this 3D level, or you're going to get promoted to a higher 3D knowledge of levels of understanding, or you're going to go to the 5th. So it's like, whatever Father decides for you
is going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
And that's where you need to be. And you got to get over your ego of thinking, well, I'm a starseed, and I'm this, and I'm that, and I used to be Cleopatra, and I used to be this. You know what? It's that kind of ego that actually turns Father off. Okay? You may have been some of these things. You may have been some great being at one time. Most of us have been. Okay? So, because we've lived so many lives, that even though most, one of the biggest memories I have is of literally being a gyro salesman on the steps of Rome, selling gyros to people.
He made a really successful business.
And I think about for some reason the story stands out to me, and I don't know why. But then I thought about it. I'm going to ask for another soul image from you, by the way.
Yeah, but
I'm going to have you do one for me. I love when she does them, for us, and she did one for herself the other day. It was just brilliant. It was just brilliant. But I want her to do one for me because I'm stuck. I'm like, baby, I want a soul image. She's like, well, you live with me. I'm like, I know, but...
I did in Michael.
Yeah, but that wasn't really me.
Oh, it is you.
Partially, maybe.
He comes out, I'm telling you, he comes out sometimes, and he is there in the background, your higher self. Yes, he is.
Well, wonderful.
And I've talked to him a few times.
I think that's wonderful, but this particular life, for whatever reason, this gyro salesman guy...
Well, you've always loved restaurant food, creation of food.
Well, I've been a restaurant manager in a couple of really good themed restaurants, and some of the other not so good themed restaurants, but you learn a lot from all of that, and you learn a lot about people.
Yeah.
I've done some interesting things in my life. I admit that, but
this seems to be that gyro salesman standing on near the Colosseum and the Roman amphitheaters, and he had quite a few people.
No, I had an
work for
actual
him.
business that.
Yeah.
I had these basically like the modern hot dog carts.
Yeah,
It
like
was
a
something
hot
like
dog
that.
cart.
And I had girls that worked for me.
Yeah, you
and
did.
in the morning they'd start the food and get it all cooked up in pots. I could tell you exactly what I did for weeks and weeks, and I have all this information about that, and I don't understand why.
Well, I do, because
I used to know the name Eviticus was one of the people that I used to talk to all the time, and he was just this brilliant statesman. And he, on the steps of Rome, he was a politician.
Yes, he was.
From Rome, and I would have conversations with him, and we would often talk about what we call the morning lights. Why did the gods create the lights the way they did? They had a different way of thinking.
Yeah, they did.
They didn't think of the sky as like stars and planets. They thought of them as each individual beings, as gods.
Well, we know that's true. In many ways.
In different dimensions,
If you look at some of the ancient people that were here on this planet around the time of the Romans, there were some pretty cruel gods out there, okay? But there were also gods who watched over us, and they've shown these in TV series, okay?
And here's another thing I used to remember. Sometimes the gods themselves would manifest in the arena and fight for the honor of Rome or for the honor of some other island or place. It was amazing. Every once in a while, the gods would manifest in the arena.
So when the Romans really got into their gods, it's because they saw them in physical form at times.
From time to time.
Yes, they did. There was a time when they were allowed to do this, and I think we've explained this before. There was a time when some of the goddesses came down here and taught what their understanding of certain things. And, there were goddesses of the hunt, goddesses of war, goddesses of love, and the same with the men.
It was the dark cabal that took many of these good teachings and turned them into darkness so that they could then harvest energies and individuals from different pantheons, different beliefs, different religions. And that's where the corruption began.
It is exactly what happened. And if you know now that we were reset over and over again, there were times when that teaching that came from the ancient beings in the stars, and they came down in a form that we understood, in a human-like form, those sculptures in Rome and Greece, 16, 20-foot sculptures, that was the size of the being that they saw and the representation of what they knew. And it's the same in Egypt. They built these great gods.
They keep saying, well, they were just egomaniacs to their gods. No, they actually built them. They built what they saw.
Yeah.
These people were very brilliant, very wise, but also very simple.
They were.
They built what they saw.
Just like they painted what they saw. Like those, if we're going to go back to it, the 15th century drawings from the Book of Miracles. They painted what they saw. They didn't have social media, and they didn't have people on the telephone telling them what was going on. They could only paint what they saw before them. So what you're seeing is the reality of what these people knew. And what's a shame here is that the Dark Cabal have made everybody out who's tried to teach these things to humanity
as witches, evil, but the reality is they're the evil ones. They are the Satanists.
They're the witches and
the really bad ones.
The really bad ones. I mean,
the Wiccan faith, by the way, which was not originally connected to Satanism, it had nothing to do with it. These were a bunch of midwives that were learning how to practice alchemy, learning how to be real doctors. And of course the AMA and the medical profession, well, not the AMA, but eventually, but the medical profession of that time came after these women, and that's what started the whole burning the witches at the stake thing, because they didn't want the competition. Because the midwives were very, very good at what they did.
They birthed babies, they healed
animals, they helped with Yeah, the things that the original midwives and the original Druids, not the ones that were consumed with darkness and sacrifice, but those that just simply believed in the land and believed in a divine being.
And where do you think that these women learned their skills from? If you think about it, these skills were given to you from the very beginning, and it was encoded into your DNA after the gods and goddesses left this planet. That DNA that they put into your body and you birthed into other children then became a code in your body and your heritage that your family would always know how to heal, how to do certain things. Some people are better builders than others. That's because that God at that time shared that DNA with you, and it opened your mind, and now your family lineage knows how to do certain things. That's where it all came from.
And certain lines are gifted with authority and power over this planet. And that's why you had the exact inversion, which was the Dark Cabal, that corrupted all of these lines so they could take over them and rule this planet without the correct authority. Because the way that Father has set it up, you have to be part of a good being or a good lineage before you yourself inherit certain powers.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It is amazing.
And everybody wants to stamp on Enki for what he did creating us. But let me tell you something about Enki. He was given permission to create us. The dark beings were never given permission to take our DNA and mutate it. Ever. Ever. You should know that. So what we have now is the dark ones trying to blame Enki for all of this, when in fact Enki had permission to go ahead with this, but everything had to be registered. It had to be governed by. It was looked over. Father was giving his A-OK on it.
Right.
And this is the stuff they don't tell you.
We did have, Father did want people to do genetics for him.
Yeah.
But he had limitations so that if you did make a discovery, it would be a good one, and then you would get all of the code. Whereas the dark beings who were doing illegal gene practices, Father would not allow them to fully discover what was necessary to make that being a happy and long-lived being, because Father had very specific codes that he would not allow to be broken when it came to genetic creation.
Yes.
And it was the tampering with this genetic code, which they've been doing since the dawn of time, that has made them, that was the one thing that Father would not forgive.
And that was something they did in Atlantis.
That's part of the reason why Atlantis fell, too.
Some of the dreams that I've been having. So let me explain this to you. When some of us were sent here to teach humanity gene splicing and genetics and DNA, we had already succeeded in doing those things with other species, and we had Father's guidance to do it. So when we came down here to teach, and this planet being a school for all species, we came down here to teach others some of the knowledge we knew under Father's guidance. Now, the reptilians were so jealous and conceited and arrogant that they're saying, okay, we're going to capture some of these teachers in Atlantis, and we're going to keep them, and we're going to covet, and we're going to bring them down, and every lifetime we're going to make them come back. And we're going to try and extract those secrets so we can do it to the other humans.
Yeah, and so that we could keep the secrets of Atlantis for us, and we would deprive it to those so that we will always remain the gods to these humans.
Yep.
So F them and F Father. Basically, that's what they did. And since that time, they have always controlled they'd give us just a tiny taste of technology, but they were always at least 50 years ahead in technology or more of our current society and whatever was being done at that time.
So in World War II, when they were doing all these experiments with the Vril, they were decoding us and re-infusing us with this little nasty creature because they wanted to control us entirely. But before that, they kept some of the older beings that came here to teach and made them come over multiple lifetimes. That's why some of you have more life memories, past life memories, than others do. Because you're older, you have these memories of being somewhere, but you're not sure where it came from. You may have been a geneticist, or you could have been a scientist. And as you know, the Nazis wanted people like that all the time. They wanted those who knew about aeronautics and traveling. They needed all of those scientists, so they've been collecting your DNA for thousands of years.
Because they know in your DNA somewhere are locked the secrets.
Yes.
That they can then extract these secrets. Remember Assassin's Creed, the
Yes.
movie? That was a perfect example of them trying to unlock secrets that existed in someone else's genetics because they wanted the information.
Yeah.
And this has been going on now on this planet, I would say probably DNA and gene extraction. That's why they're collecting all your DNA and all that stuff and blood and everything else, and next time you go to Ancestry.com, remember, they're creating a pool of individuals that they can then, at a future date, come and find you because they can sniff you out based on your DNA. But that's why you shouldn't give your DNA away.
I read an article the other day that China is now asking men to go and have their sperm tested, okay?
Yeah.
The reason why they want to test the sperm is they want to see the strongest strain.
How are they going to test the sperm?
I read an article the other day that they're asking males to come forward and have their sperm tested, and it's just so they can find out who's the oldest, who has got the strongest strain of sperm, because strong sperm make strong children. Now think about this, and if they've already started mutating our DNA with frogs, cows, we know they are.
Yeah, they're called chimeras.
Yeah.
And they've existed now since the dawn of time.
Mm-hmm.
That's where a lot of your mythos come from, the Minotaur and all that kind of stuff. One moment.
Came from beings who were actually experimented upon. You guys? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Stephen A. Jones here, once again, to give you my 1.5 pensies. I think that the whole thing has been going on for not only a few years, but a whole lot of years, and they keep screwing around with the genomes because they figure at some point it'll be like the lottery. They might get lucky and get the right combinations so that they can, create the Kwisatz Haderach, to pull a page out of Dune, everyone seems to love talking about. The super being or beings that they themselves want to control. And you know what they're actually doing is they've been searching for those with the strongest genetics, and they want to combine the strongest genetics with the strongest possible mortal coil that they can create, like a super soldier or something along that lines. And then they want to start manufacturing these bodies, both male and female, and use them for whatever they deem. And this has been going on for quite some time, too, where a lot of these demonic beings can inhabit these created clones, which are essentially a repository for them, so that they can wrap themselves in what is essentially humanoid flesh. And this is why they have such problems navigating in what's going on in our world today, because the world is actually intended for humans at a frequency somewhere between 7 and 8 on the Schumann scale, right? And that's not supposed to vary. So what they do is they program a lot of their clones, a lot of their technology around that specific frequency so that they are bathed in that frequency so that they appear to be 100% human. Of course, the only problem being is that they have difficulty controlling their shape sometimes when certain events are going on, such as solar pulses. Yes, that's been going on lately. Also, there are other situations where there are energetic pulses that have been happening. And let me tell you, the sun ties into all of this nicely, because it is the sun that is essentially the eye of Father, and he can project energy through there, especially since one of his avatars is currently right next to the sun and is tweaking the energy to make sure that everybody gets the right energy pulse. Because these energy pulses are unlocking various abilities, are driving away some of these darker beings, and creating a world where higher frequencies, which, by the way, are also allowing many of you to ascend, or will allow you to ascend, or at least move up the sliding scale a bit, like Victoria explained earlier. So these are important things that you need to know about so that you can either participate and eventually ascend possibly to the next dimension, or slide your ass back down into the lower planes of hell if that's where you want to go. And there are some people that want to do that. For goodness sakes, I don't know why, because what you got to go through is quite frankly hell on many circumstances.
It's worse than you can imagine, though. Some of the lower dimensions are just awful.
And they are there specifically for beings that can't seem to learn anything, no matter how hard you try to get them to go up the spectrum. Now, Father will let you travel up the darker spectrums too, right? As long as you play by the rules. There's still going to be rules on both sides. And darkness seems to think it doesn't have to play by the rules. And that's why it usually ends up getting way ahead of everybody for a while until we figure it out and what's going on, like what's going on Earth right now. It's pretty amazing. The whole world is standing up. And oh, by the way, we predicted that one too. We also told you about liquefaction. But I'm all here to tell you, Victoria was talking about liquefaction. We're not just talking about water people. We're talking about people.
Humans.
People. They have this wonderful thing called liquefaction, where they can literally pour you down the drain when they're done with you. They put you in this tube and super pressurize it and basically liquefy you into a gelatinous liquid substance, and then they can flush it down the drain. How convenient. Of course, you know, that'll all end up in your water supply. And on your food, yeah, there are farmers around the world that are taking these liquid fertilizer, as they're now being called, and spraying it on wonderful plants. You know, all that wonderful greenery that you like to eat so much to stay healthy. Well, the first thing I would do is rinse all that crap off, if you even want to eat it from some of these bigger box stores. Imagine the deliciousness of sprayed dead body all over your food.
I know that sounds awful, but this is where
Oh,
we're
it's
at.
horrible. It sounds horrible.
And then you notice all the water that is flooding our Earth right now, all the garbage that's getting flushed out into the oceans.
Yeah, well, that's going to get flushed out and end up on, when the water recedes, it's going to end up everywhere. So now you got garbage, you got all this crap everywhere, you got all this liquid sewage and dirt and everything else all mixed in with industrial stuff and everyone's houses and everything. Oh, yeah, that's going to be some... it's coming. It's coming. Yeah.
So just water disease alone, like dysentery.
Cholera.
Yeah,
that
cholera.
kind of stuff. Not very nice. And yeah, it just gets around. Cause I'll tell you what, you get any of that water in your mouth, and then before you realize it, you know, people got cholera. You got to be careful. You got to be careful around this stuff.
Make sure you've got some kind of filtration system for your water right now.
Yeah.
That's pretty important. And also, if you...
We got a Berkey.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we do.
and we always put water in it. It's time to change
The filter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting there.
Although there's that trick you can do.
Yeah, where you blow the filter out. Yeah, we're going to do that.
Yeah, we're going to do
You
that.
know how we're going to do it? We got that thing from the truck. That air pressure.
Yes.
And we're going to stick it in there and put it in the bucket. And it'll be like...
Yeah, but you can use pressure. Hose pressure
Yeah,
too.
back pressure, and then you blow all the crap out, and then you rinse it off again.
Save yourself $70, I think.
Yeah, you can do it. They said 2 or 3 times you can do that before you really have to get another filter, because the filter concentration stuff is really high in these filters, so they're really good at the filtration they do.
Yeah, and we have well water, so you know.
Yeah, I mean, we're so glad that we have well water, which is out in the middle of no frickin' where.
Yeah.
So it can't be contaminated by, say, I don't know, bodies being flushed down the drain, eventually make it into your water. So, yeah, no thanks.
There's not enough population out here for them to kind of do
Yeah,
that.
that's right. That's right. You got your own well, so, you know, and believe me, that's good.
Yeah, especially in this area, it's some of the best water in the world. It's really, really good water out here.
pH is about 8.
Yeah, I mean, that
8.2.
actually extends human life, that stuff you guys are drinking, the water you drink.
I've tested the water out here, and it's about
pH 8.
8, and sometimes a little higher.
Remember you had to use to water it down for some of the plants?
Yeah, I have to, because if
They
you
like
have
plants
that,
like pH around between 6 and 7.
yeah, and if the mineral content is a bit too high, the roots can't uptake the nutrients. So that's something you want to check with your water when you're growing food too. Is make sure that if you've got just too much high pH in there, mineral content, you might want to put just a tiny little bit of vinegar in your water, and
Yeah.
it brings the pH down a bit.
Do you know if you take a tablespoon of vinegar and put it in a cup of milk and whip it, that you create heavy whipping cream?
You see?
Isn't that neat? There's a chemical reaction. It basically reduces, it turns it into whipping cream. So we figured that out the other day. I mean, we're not really very knowledgeable as cooks in the fourth
I don't
dimension,
know.
but
You guys make some pretty cool stuff. Because spirit's the cook, right?
yeah, not spirit cooking, cooking with spirits.
Right.
That we were going to do a book like that.
Yeah, we still will.
Yeah, if there's ever, now's not the best time with the whole world on fire and flooding at the same time. Yeah, we did tell you about that too. I remember all those people laughing at us. Floods. Ha ha ha, that'll never happen.
Well,
hey, where's the water, you guys? And it's like, well, we got, not only is it going to flood, you got liquefaction coming. Basically to land, to people, to water. And we predicted that too, and we got laughed at for that one. Well, they're not laughing no more, especially over in frickin' China and, places like that. No one's laughing. It's terrible what's going on to these innocent people. That's what we feel bad about, is all the innocents caught in between us. But I'm sorry, man. This is just that time. Father's like, well, if good people get wiped out, don't worry, I'll take care of them.
Yeah.
Father will just resurrect you and you'll have a beautiful life.
So don't be afraid of any of this.
Yeah, you really shouldn't. So, I mean, if something happens to you, you're probably not even going to know.
Yeah.
Because Father really takes care of his own. If you pass, sometimes he pulls you before you experience any of the pain. You just, boom, you're a soul. It's like,
Those who have done wicked things.
Those are the
usually
ones
suffer
that
in
get,
pain
yeah.
At the time of their death. Father,
Not always,
because-
not because of the cabal, and doing things like chemo and stuff. A lot of people died that didn't need to. So they suffered needlessly by the cabal, but all of that pain will be repaid by Father at some point.
Yeah. Really, death is just,
A transition.
moving out of your fleshly suit and into a different dimensional aspect.
Yeah.
Whether it's fourth, fifth, or a higher third dimension. It doesn't really matter, guys. It's all
upwards.
Yeah.
And that's Father says, as long as you're making progress, I don't care how it could take you a million years to go from the third to the fourth, if that's what you wanted, or the third to the fifth. It's up to you. He says, but I want to create a good world now. It's time for the earth to be good for quite some time. Just the beginning of the age of Aquarius and knowledge and understanding and light. It is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Age of Aquarius.
Yes, well, if you understand
Aquarius.
how dimensions work now, and Stephen's singing that song,
Aquarius.
it's got nothing to do with witchcraft or anything like that.
No, it was a song about the coming of the age of Aquarius.
Yeah.
Of course, everything gets co-opted by the dark elite, so they turn it all around into something horrible. Like the swastika, which was never the swastika. It was a sign of good luck, long life, and they sort of tilted it a little bit and said, that'll do. And they turned it into a dark instrument, a terrible construct that reminds people when they see it, that symbol of Nazism, but yet a while ago it meant good things.
Yeah.
See what they've done? Do you see? Anyhow, for When the Ancients Speak, this is Mike, Victoria, Stephen A. Jones, and many others, here to wish you a wonderful day. And for those of you, if you haven't checked out the cutting room floor, that's what we're always talking about. It's not just additional recordings that we do. It's also really cool stuff that keeps you up to date. You get all your news in one place. And let me tell you, all that for under $5 a month to help support us, help support the Kellys, and also to keep us online. Because, yes, it's quite expensive every month to pay for all this stuff. So, anyhow, for those of you that have been contributing, we're deeply grateful. Blessings, love, and light to you all.